Hello, this is Susan Woods, and welcome to the Basic Grant Writing class. This is a copyright notice for this class. No sharing, please. All rights are reserved. No part of this document may be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission from the company. A little bit about my background. Again, I'm Susan Woods. I started a nonprofit organization in 2003 called Comprehensive Community-Based Solutions Incorporated. I officially incorporated it in February of 2006 as a 501c3. I operated two programs underneath the organization, one called Panorama Computer Learning Program, in which I provided basic level Microsoft classes for displaced manufacturing workers, and the other program was the Emerging Leaders Mentorship Program for Black male youth, in which we prepare Black male youth for success. I offer two nonprofit consulting services primarily. I complete the 501c3 application packets for private clients from beginning until end, and I also facilitate a broad range of classes for nonprofit leaders on the third Saturday of each month except November and December. In addition, I also facilitate webinars. I have three nonprofit management certifications, one from Duke University, in which I earned in 2017, Winthrop University in 2016, and Wake Forest University in 2015. I'm also a three-time graduate of Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I earned a bachelor's degree in business administration, a Master of Arts degree in business education, and a Master of Business Administration degree. The services that I provide are as follows. Under Susan Woods Nonprofit Consulting Services, I provide nonprofit DVD classes, so thank you very much for ordering the Basic Grant Writing DVD class. I facilitate instructor-led nonprofit classes. Once again, I facilitate classes on the third Saturday of each month, except November and December, from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. I offer private nonprofit consulting services. And I also complete the 501c3 application packet for private clients. So again, welcome. In this class, you will learn the following. You will learn to write a basic grant proposal. You will learn to maintain a grant proposal database. And you will also learn how to present your grant proposal to panelists. Class prerequisites. To be successful after completing this class, there are some prerequisites that you should have already completed. However, if you have not completed these prerequisites, don't be discouraged. These are just things that you know you have to have in place before you can successfully write a grant proposal. The prerequisites for this class are as follows. You should have observed a problem that has bothered you. That's the first thing that leads a person to thinking about starting a 501c3 is you have observed a problem in your community that has bothered you for a period of time. Then you confirm the validity of the problem, meaning that not only have you observed the problem, but others have also observed the problem, and you have confirmed that it is having a negative impact on the community. Then you started a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so you now have in your possession a determination letter from the IRS that states that you have 501c3 status. You describe the program activities. You have already written a program description of the activities that you want to provide that will solve the problem that you have observed. You have written the program budget. After you have provided a program description, then you have already written the budget that you need in order to implement the program services that you have described. You have created a revenue generation team, and that's a group of people whose job responsibilities include generating the revenues that are needed to offer the program in your community. And then you have located the request for proposals. And we're going to talk about requests for proposals in more detail in this class, but requests for our proposals are just what they are. They are requests that foundations have sent out asking nonprofit leaders to submit grant proposals to secure the revenues that they are offering. So these are the prerequisites for this class. Let's talk about them in more detail. The first prerequisite, observe the problem. What is wrong? What is wrong that you have observed in your community that's bothering you? You want to define the problem very clearly. What is wrong? Could it be homeless veterans? Is that something that you observed in your community? Could it be children not able to read on a third grade level in your community? Is that the problem that you observed? What's wrong? Then you confirm the problem, like I mentioned before. Make sure it's not just you that's observing this problem. Make sure that it's a problem that's impacting the community in a negative way and others agree with you. Describe the demographics. Who's being impacted by this problem? Again, are they veterans who are homeless? Are they children who can't read? Are they senior citizens who need assistance with their home care needs? Describe the people that you plan to serve or who are experiencing this problem. Describe the service area. Where is this problem primarily located? You want to describe it very clearly. Is it in a town? Is it in a county? Is it in a city? Is it in a little small community within a town? You want to be able to describe the service area. The next prerequisite is describing the program that you plan to offer to solve the problem. What's the vision? What's the mission? What's the narrative? What's the budget? And how are you going to evaluate success? These components of the program description must be clearly written. So the vision is the broad goal that you have for solving the problem. If it's the veterans, the homeless veterans, then your vision could be to provide housing for every homeless veteran in Marlborough County. Now that's a vision because it's broad. The mission explains how the vision will be realized. So if you want to provide homes or housing for every homeless veteran in Marlborough County, how are you going to do that? By offering subsidized housing services for homeless veterans. That could be a mission statement because it tells you how the vision is going to be realized. Now, the narrative is a very long list of the steps that you will use to provide housing services for veterans. What are you going to do to make this happen? Just think of the word narrative. The word narrative means explain. Explain how you're going to provide those housing services for veterans. Are you going to buy houses that are available and then remodel them for the needs of the veterans you want to serve? Are you going to build houses from the ground up? If so, how are you going to do that? How are you going to get the land? So your narrative really explains exactly what you're planning to do to make your mission and vision a reality. And then the budget. You can't create a budget before you do the narrative because the narrative explains how things are going to be implemented and the budget will explain how much it's going to cost. So if you're going to say go the route of building small homes for veterans, then how much is that going to cost? You have to do your research to determine what the budget is going to be. And then you create the budget. And then the last thing you want to be able to do, you want to be able to evaluate. How are you going to evaluate your success? Well, to evaluate your success, you have to have had goals. So, for example, you have to have had two types of goals, and we're going to talk about these in more detail later, but you have qualitative goals and quantitative goals. Your qualitative goals talk about the behavioral changes that you can expect to see after a veteran has his or her own home. That's a qualitative goal. Maybe they started out with a very depressed demeanor because they were homeless, but once they were given a home to live in, their demeanor changed to be one of being happy. So that's a qualitative goal that you can list and evaluate. Quantitative goal determines the number of people that you're going to help. So say that you're going to help 20 veterans per year. That's a quantitative goal that's easily evaluated So at the end of the year, you could just evaluate whether or not you met that goal by counting the number of veterans that you have placed in homes. So these are the components of a program description that must be very clearly written before you can even consider applying for grant money. So let's talk about creating the program budget in more detail here. The program budget includes 3 categories. You have program expenses, operating expenses, and personnel expenses. Now, program expenses include all of the expenses that are needed to be covered in order to provide the program services that touch the people who are being served. For example, one program service or one program expense would be the home, right? If you're going to provide housing for veterans, then one of the expenses would definitely be the home that you're going to provide for the veteran. How much is the house going to cost? That's an expense. Operating expenses could be such things as if you're going to provide some type of transportation services for the veterans, or if you're going to provide subsidized housing for the veteran in which you're going to cover some of the costs of the expenses, of the utilities. That's an operating expense. And then personnel expenses include the cost to hire people to operate the program. So those are the 3 components of a program budget that have to be written and very clearly explained. So let's say the total budget for whatever you're planning to offer is $250,000. And that's okay. If that's what the budget is, that's what the budget is. Sometimes it's a Now, we've already talked about how to develop the revenue generation team. So let's say that after the board of directors approves the $250,000 budget, the executive director instructs the revenue generation team manager to generate the funds. Now, the next prerequisite we need to talk about is how to locate the RFPs, or requests for proposals. There are 3 major categories of RFPs. You have the corporate RFP, the foundation RFP, and the government RFP. Now, underneath the government RFP, you have city government, county government, and state government, and federal government RFPs. The way this can work is you have one RFP specialist assigned to locate compatible corporate RFPs. Their assignment is to locate 5 compatible corporate RFPs per week, as you can see in the table. The RFPs that they locate should total $50,000 in available funding listed in the RFP. You will have one RFP specialist assigned to foundation RFPs. Their job is to find 5 foundation RFPs that are compatible to your goal, with a total of $50,000 being available to apply for in the RFP, and so on, as you can see in this table. In this example, you have a total of 7 RFP specialists. They will be responsible for locating 35 RFPs per week, broken down as shown here in the table. And the total amount of funding available in all of the RFPs combined will be $250,000. Now, this is just a table that I recommend you using in order to manage the grant writing process, because we're focusing on grant writing in this class. So this is an example of a table that you can use to locate RFPs and break down the RFP research responsibilities among corporate, foundation, and government research specialists. So the next thing that I recommend doing as a prerequisite to writing grants is to create an RFP tracking spreadsheet similar to what you see here. This tracking spreadsheet shows the program name that you are going to use to solve the problem that you've identified, the RFP source, where you located the RFP type, the amount you plan to request, the amount available in the RFP, the grant proposal due date, and then the amount received. So let's talk about this. In this case, you are planning to start a home health services program. That's the program you want to start to solve the problem of senior citizens not having high quality home health services. So you've decided to solve this problem. You have located RFPs at the Dollar General website, at the Wells Fargo website, in the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Program website. Let's just pretend. Now, you want to, when you find an RFP source, you want to go ahead and include the link in your spreadsheet the way that this one is showing, so that next year you won't have to do the searches or the extensive searching that you had to do to get it the first time. You have the link here. You can just go back from year to year. The RFP type tells me that the Dollar General RFP comes from a foundation. So it's the Dollar General Foundation. The Wells Fargo RFP comes from a corporate foundation. And the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention link comes from a government, the federal government specifically. Now, the amount that you requested from each one of these sources is listed here. So you requested $10,000 from Dollar General, $20,000 from Wells Fargo, and $50,000 from Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. The amount available that was listed in the RFP were $15,000, $50,000, and $120,000 respectively. Then you have the due dates of the grant proposals. It's important to write down the due dates of the grant proposals so that you can track when the grants are due. So this also helps with you planning your calendar for next year. So you know from now on that in May, Dollar General is accepting applications. In August, Wells Fargo, and in December, the Office of Juvenile Justice. So next year on your calendar, you would know how to plan to apply for those grants. And then the amount that you actually received are listed here. Of the $10,000 you requested from Dollar General, you received 7. Of the $20,000 you requested from Wells Fargo, you received 12. Of the $50,000 you requested from the federal government, you received all of it. I wanted to point this out to let you know that grant funders may not give you everything that you ask for in a grant proposal. They may pick and choose what they choose to give. There are times also that you may have written an excellent grant proposal and not receive any money, depending upon the circumstances. That's why it is very important to use the table that we just talked about and to submit several grant proposals per week, so that if you are denied funding, and you will be, you won't be relying on just one grant proposal. We've talked about the prerequisites, and I hope that you have a very good understanding of the prerequisites that I explained that should be in place before you start writing a grant. So now we're going to actually get into the grant writing class. So this is the basic grant writing class. And in this class, we're going to have a case study. The case study is a home health services program. So we're going to pretend that we are going to start a home health services program because we have observed a need in our community for such a program. We're going to look at the organizational structure, the grant proposal components, how to sell the grant proposal, how to select grant writers, and some words of advice and question and answer. So this is what this class is going to entail. Again, our focus throughout the remainder of this class is going to be on creating a home health services program in your community. Case study home health services program. So here is the organizational structure. The name of your organization is called Life Enhancement Services Incorporated. The EIN, or Employer Identification Number, for your organization is 421672537. You have a board of directors, you have an executive director, you have a director, you have a row of managers. Underneath the programs manager, you have the programs that you're going to offer through your organization. You have under the operations manager, the logistics team, and the facilities team. You have the marketing manager, traditional media, social media, finance manager, accounting and IRS reports, and compliance manager, human resources and legal. This is just a suggestion on how to establish an organizational structure, but you need to have one in order to be successful. We are focusing on one program, and that's the home health services program, in which to write grant proposals. The grant writing team, this should look familiar because we just talked about a table that's very similar to this, but this one focuses on the actual grant writing team. So you have the different divisions or different types of RFPs. You got a corporate, foundation, city government, county government, state government, and federal government. You have the RFP research specialist. We have the RFPs per week. Now we're looking at the number of grant writers that's assigned to each type of RFP. We have one grant writer assigned to corporate. So in 1 week, that grant writer will be responsible for submitting 5 grant proposals per week because they have 5 RFPs that have been given to them per week. Now the PR means proofreader, and so every grant writer is assigned 1 proofreader. Let's jump down to the federal government. You notice that the federal government has 2 RFP research specialists, and they will have 10 RFPs per week. You have 5 grant writers instead of 1, and 10 grant proposals that are submitted per week, and 5 proofreaders. The reason that we have more people on the federal government level is because they are so much more complex. The RFPs for federal government are very, very complex, and you would need more than 1 grant writer to respond to a federal government grant. So that's why we have more people assigned here. And again, this is just an example of how you can create or how you can make assignments to the members of your grant writing team. Let's talk about the federal grant writing team. Let's say you have a weekly goal of 10 federal grant proposals that you want to submit to the federal government every week. So you have research specialist number 1. They hand off 5 RFPs to the grant writer. Then you have research specialist 2, 5 RFPs to the grant writing team manager. So you have a total of 10 RFPs that are going to be handed off to the grant writing team manager, right? Then that grant writing team manager will hand off the RFPs to grant writer 1. They will write 2 grants. They will hand their 2 grants over to the proofreader. The grant writer 2 write 2 federal grants, hand them over to the proofreader number 2. Grant writer number 3 will write 2 grants, hand off to proofreader number 3. Grant writer 4 will write 2 grants, hand it off to proofreader number 4. Grant writer 5 will write 2 grants, hand it off to proofreader number 5. So every grant writer has its own proofreader. So this setup, the way that you see in here, this process could be a very lucrative business opportunity, and that is to create a grant writing team. Because let me tell you, at least once every single week, I have people to call me or contact me in some way asking if I write grants. And I don't write grants. I wrote grants for my nonprofit organization when we were offering the program services that I introduced you to in the first part of this class. I wrote grants because I had to, not because I enjoyed it. You have to enjoy writing grants to be a professional grant writer, in my opinion. So it's very hard, or has been very difficult for me, to find people who are reliable, credible grant writers with a proven track record of success. So when people reach out to me, I don't even have anybody to refer them to, and that's unfortunate. Hopefully that will change. So if you like this setup, if you like this strategy, this is a business opportunity that you could possibly pursue. Let's look at the grant proposal components, because the grant proposal has standard components that almost every grant proposal will include. So you have the problem statement, program vision, program mission, qualitative objectives, quantitative goals, program description, program budget, implementation strategy, evaluation methodology, and sustainability plan. These are the 10 standard components of a basic grant proposal. We've already discussed a few of them, so I will review them very briefly. But these are the 10 components that you should create as a standard format for your grant proposals. And then once you have created a standard grant proposal, then you can always go back and copy and paste to tweak it to meet the needs or meet the requirements of the request for proposal. Let's look at each one of them separately. The problem statement, number 1. Normally, the first section of the grant proposal represents only 10% of the grant proposal. You have to be very succinct in explaining the problem. States the problem in the target population. So you want to make sure that you stay focused on the target population that you want to help. In this case, we're talking about people who need home health care services. They are in our target population. Educate the reader about the problem. You have to make sure that the reader, the person that's reading this grant proposal, really understands the magnitude of the problem that you have observed and have been moved to solve. They may not know that there is an issue with home health care services for people who need those services. So that's your job, to make sure that you provide tangible data that shows or proves the need for home health care services. Include current and accurate statistics. This is where you have to do your research and find current and accurate statistics about the problem that you have identified in your area. How many people need the services? How many organizations are currently providing the services? What is the quality of services that they provide? And so on and so forth. Personalize the community problems. Make the people who you are talking about real in terms of providing some scenarios of how they live, of the problem. Mr. Jones is living with his family. They are doing the best that they can, but they don't have the services that they need for him to live comfortably in their home environment. Something like that. Make it personal. Use visuals to clarify the information. If you have statistics that are available, if you can create a pie chart or a bar chart or something like that to include visuals, do that. Make it easy to read and understand for the person that's reading the problem statement. And finally, end with a strong closing statement. At the end of the problem statement, you could end with something like, if we do not provide services, high quality home health services for this population of people, then we are doing a disservice for the people who have made our communities what they are. Something along those lines to really draw in the person who is reading your grant proposal. So that's the problem statement. That's number one. That's the first component of your grant proposal. Number two, your vision statement. The vision statement is a broad statement that describes the change your clients will enjoy as a result of the nonprofit programs and services that you offer. It's a very broad statement. For example, senior citizens will receive high quality and reliable home health services at all times. That's broad, but that's the vision that you have for the program that you want to offer. That's the second component of a basic grant proposal. The third component of a basic grant proposal is a mission statement. The mission statement of a basic grant proposal explains how the vision will be realized. So this part of the grant proposal explains how we're going to realize the vision that we just stated. For example, provide nurturing and client-focused home health care providers who exhibit patience and compassion. So in other words, to make people happy, we have to provide them with nurturing and client-focused home health care providers who exhibit patience and compassion. That's how we realize the vision. So component number 3 of a basic grant proposal is the mission statement. Component number 4 of a basic grant proposal includes qualitative objectives. So the qualitative objectives measures changes in behaviors and attitudes in the target population. Your target population includes people who need home health care services. So your qualitative objectives are written in a way that they measure the changes in their behaviors and their attitudes. These changes are referred to as outcomes that are measured over a certain period of time. Qualitative objectives documents before and after, and they also provide a clear understanding and a visual understanding of the reason for investments. Mr. Jones came into our facility. Oh, let me back up. We went to Mr. Jones's home, and he was very sad. He was just in his room, and he wasn't really engaged because he didn't have adequate home health care services. After we implement the services, our qualitative goals measures a change in his behavior. When our home health services providers arrive at his home now, he's happy to see them. He looks forward to their visits because he knows that they care about him and they're going to provide high quality services. That's an example of how you can write qualitative objectives. So component number 4 of a basic grant proposal talks about qualitative objectives. And here's an example. The seniors are happier, more comfortable, and relaxed after receiving excellent home health care services. So once again, we're talking about before their attitude and their behaviors before they receive the home health services and comparing them to after they receive the home health services. That's how you want to write qualitative objectives. Component number 5 of 10, the fifth component of 10 components of a basic grant proposal, include quantitative goals. Now, quantitative goals are quantifiable metrics. They measure the output. They're realistic and attainable. For example, we're going to enroll 100 clients monthly, and we're going to earn an 80% approval rating. Your quantitative goals have key performance indicators, and they also talk about reasons for investments. An example, we will provide excellent home health services for 100 people per month in the communities we serve. Now that's measuring an output. How many people are you going to serve per month? 100. That's our quantitative goal. And we're going to also earn an 80% approval rating from those people that we serve. That's our goal. In order for any program to be effective, you have to have measurable quantitative goals. Because how can you, at the end of a year, determine whether or not your program made a difference if you don't have goals established? So number 5 of 10 of the basic grant proposal components talks about quantitative goals. Number 6 is the program description. Grant writers request money to fund programs to solve problems identified in the target population. Let me read that sentence again because it reviews information that we've already discussed. Grant writers request money to fund programs to solve problems identified in the target population. So you've already identified the problems that you want to solve for the people who you want to work with. The program description must clearly explain how investing in the program will help your target group live better. In this section of your grant proposal, you have to really let the reviewers see the positive impact that your program will have in helping the target group live better. So let's talk about the different parts of the program description. The first part is the problem. You want to restate the problem that you've already outlined in the grant proposal. You want to restate it here because sometimes when grant reviewers are reading a grant proposal, they divide the grant proposal up based on the different sections of the grant proposal. So you want to restate the problem here so that whoever is reading the program description will get an understanding of the problem you're trying to solve through the program. Next, you want to describe the demographic profile, the age of the people you're helping, the income, the race, the education, the gender, and since we're focusing on home health services in this program, we're going to talk about the health status. Then you want to repeat or reiterate the service area that you're going to provide your program in. What's the location? What's the population? What's the distance? What's the mileage? In this section of the program description, don't feel pressured to describe a huge service area, because the grant reviewers are going to look at your grant proposal holistically, meaning they're going to look at, if you say we're going to serve 3 states on the East Coast, and then later on they see in your grant proposal that you only have 4 people on your team, that's not feasible. So you want your service area to reflect feasibility, meaning you want the grant reviewer or grant proposal reviewer to believe it's feasible for you to provide the program successfully in this service area. Program activities. Your program activities clearly list everything that you're going to do or provide in your program. This needs to be clearly outlined, so there is no question about what people will receive through your program. So the program activities should include the objectives, the tasks, the activities, your operational hours, the schedule, the return on investment, expectations a person should have if the grant reviewer or grant team decides to invest, and what evaluation plan are you going to use to prove that your program is working. So again, your program activities is just say that you are going to use the program activities to help the grant reviewers visualize what a person will receive when they enroll or become a part of your program. Human resources. Who will you need, or what roles will you need in order to implement your program? So decide on the roles that you're going to need, and then you want to create job descriptions, salaries, and source documentation. Now, source documentation means if I say I need a CNA, because we're doing home health services, if I need a CNA, then I need to describe the CNA's job responsibilities. I need to go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's www.bls.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics.gov. I need to go there to determine the appropriate salary for a certified nursing assistant or CNA. And then I need to document where I received that information to prove that I'm not just arbitrarily coming up with a job description and a salary range, that I do have sources for that information. That has to be proven here. And finally, you want to list the partnerships that you have developed in the community for your clients, to provide services for your clients. In other words, you want to develop partnerships with other organizations that serve the same clients that you serve. And in this case, if you're providing home health services for people, then another organization in the community that probably serves that same client would be the Department of Social Services. So you want to develop some type of partnership with other organizations that serve the clients that you're serving. So that's the program description, the components of it. It should take you a couple of days to really write a good program description. This is not something that should be written hastily, because it should clearly walk anyone through the steps that you're going to use to describe an effective program for your clients. Let's talk about number 7, which is the program budget. The program budget proposal itemizes the 3 major expenses. You have program expenses, operating expenses, and personnel expenses. Now, you could not write a program budget before you wrote the program description. because you're going to use the information in the program description to create your program budget. So you would use that information to determine what parts of the program description would be earmarked for each of the three major expenses listed here: program, operating, and personnel. So this is an example of a spreadsheet that you can use to create a program budget. You have a column for description, number of units, cost per unit, total, and the source. Now, under the description, you have program expenses, then you total those up. You have operating expenses, total those up. Then you have personnel expenses. And let's say that the total for this entire home health services budget is $250,000. So now we're going to look at the implementation timeline, which is number 8. The implementation timeline should be an easy to follow, at a glance look at the way in which your program is going to be implemented, how it's going to look chronologically. So we have the what, when, how, and who. What, when, how, and who. So we have what? Hire healthcare specialists. When? 4/30/13. How? Through interviews. Who or whom is going to do that? Jane Doe. That's her responsibility. And so you just read this list of things, and you want to, again, put your implementation timeline in chronological order so that people will understand what they can expect on certain dates. And this is very important for grant providers or grant funders. They want to know precisely what to expect from your organization. So this timeline, as you can see, is pretty simple to follow and pretty simple to understand. Surprisingly, it takes quite a bit of effort to create an implementation timeline correctly, because you have so many tasks that need to be completed in order to implement a program. My suggestion is to just brainstorm first. Brainstorm and write everything down, all of the tasks that need to be completed, and then go back and put those tasks in numerical order in which they should be completed. And then you put them into your implementation timeline. Because if you try to start with your implementation timeline first by filling in the blanks and not really thinking of the task first, then it's going to take longer to do, because you're going to have to keep going back and making corrections. So my suggestion is, again, brainstorm, write the tasks down that need to be completed in order to implement your program, and then go back and put them in chronological order. Your evaluation plan. Your evaluation plan always goes back to comparing what is going on to the objectives. What I mean by that is, we need to show in a grant proposal a way in which you will evaluate your program. So I like this little scorecard, so to speak, that is easy to follow, easy to read, and it lets the grant funders know how you are going to evaluate your program. You're going to have qualitative objectives, and you're going to have a column whether or not you met or changes that need to be made if you didn't. So you have the clients are happy and relaxed. Okay, that was one of the objectives, right? Remember, and qualitative objectives measures the changes in behavior. So the clients are happy and relaxed. Did you meet it? Yes. What changes need to be made? None. So that's how you create an evaluation plan. And this just, again, is a sample evaluation plan that you would put into a grant proposal to let the grant funders know how you are planning to evaluate your program. Of course, you're not evaluating the program yet because it hasn't been implemented yet, but this lets them know how you would do it. Your quantitative goals: enrolled 100 clients per month. Met? No. How are you going to change that? You're going to advertise more. So again, this is a sample of what you would provide the grant funders to let them know how you will evaluate your program. The last component of a grant proposal, the 10th component of a grant proposal, is sustainability, the sustainability plan. Sustainability explains how you will continue offering services at the same level consistently over the years. Now, sustainability has not always been a part of a grant proposal. Hasn't always been a part of it. But what has happened over the years is grant funders have invested money into organizations only to have those organizations dissolve if they do not continue to invest. Grant funders do not want to be the only source of funding for your organization, and they shouldn't be. Your organization should be so important to the community that you should not have to rely upon just one source of revenue. So sustainability will explain how you're going to keep going over the years consistently at the same level of services. Demonstrating how you can sustain services beyond the grant funding sources is critical for grant approval. You have to show how you're going to do it. You can say, well, we apply for 5 grants per week, or we submit 5 grant proposals per week. We have a fundraising team that is divided into 2 groups. One group does traditional fundraising, another group does social media fundraising. And then we have ambassadors. Ambassadors are the people who are on the ground, so to speak, who are attending networking events and talking about our program and marketing our program and requesting investments. And then we have our telemarketers who are also a part of our ambassadors team, and they call people on the phone and to tell them about our program. So you want to show in your sustainability plan ways in which you are going to sustain your organization consistently over the years. Another thing you want to talk about in your sustainability plan is how are you going to sustain employees? How are you going to sustain clients? How are you going to keep employees on your team and volunteers on your team? How are you going to keep clients wanting your services, especially in a competitive market like home health services? So you also have to provide a sustainability plan for that. Let's talk about sustainability and what it includes, what tasks it includes. And I've already alluded to this a little bit, but I want to drill down just a little bit more. Sustainability includes the following tasks. Again, securing revenues. You have to have money. You must have money to operate a program. You cannot operate a program without money. Unfortunately, people tend to believe that because you are a nonprofit organization, you're not supposed to have money. That is ridiculous. You cannot offer a program without money. So you have to secure revenues consistently. You have to have a reliable source of revenues. You have to attract clients. You attract clients by providing high quality services all of the time. Word of mouth, positive word of mouth. You have to retain good employees. How do you do that? Well, you have to pay them a salary. You have to provide positive reinforcement. You have to recognize their good work. You also have to put in place policies that will provide corrective action whenever it's needed. But you want to retain employees. You want to cultivate partnerships. Who else is working in the community with your clients? You want to create partnerships with them and cultivate those partnerships by making sure that whatever partnership agreement is signed, that you hold up to your end of that partnership. You want to broadcast your success. Tell the world how well your home health services program is doing and benefiting the community. And finally, you want to keep accurate records. You want to make sure that you maintain accurate records of your success, of your finances, of your human resource files. All of those things you have to keep, and you want to keep those accurately. So let's just review the grant proposal components. Again, there are 10 components. You have the problem statement, program vision, program mission, qualitative objectives, quantitative goals, program description, program budget, implementation strategy, evaluation methodology, and sustainability plan. Those are the grant proposal components. I suggest to go ahead and create a standard grant proposal that includes all of these components, and that would be the one that you would save and not change. That would be the one that you would go to and pull information from to put into grant proposals based on the request for proposals, the requirements in the request for proposals. Let's talk about image. Image matters. The image of a grant proposal impacts its score by 20%. Yes, grant proposals are scored, especially on the government level. What happens is a group of people will meet in a room on designated days to review grant proposals. They will compare your grant proposal to the RFP in terms of making sure that your grant proposal is organized according to RFP guidelines. If your grant proposal is not organized according to RFP guidelines, then points will be subtracted from your total. Most grant proposals are funded if they receive an 80% score or higher. Every component of a grant proposal is assigned a score. Grant reviewers use a scoring criteria. For example, your problem statement could represent 40 points out of 100 because it's so important. So just bear in mind that the image meaning how does it look? Is it organized correctly? Did you use the correct font? Did you use the correct line spacing? Did you use the correct page margin spacing? Did you use numbering? Did you include numbering in the bottom right corner? All of those things are important. And then proofread your grant proposal perhaps a day later. A day later, because when you are working on a grant for days and days and days and days and you finally finish it, you don't want to have to send it in right then. You want to be able to put it aside for at least a whole day and then come back to it and read it. Grant writer's follow-up process. How do you follow up after you have submitted a grant proposal? After submitting your grant proposal, you should follow up on the items below. Make sure the grant proposal was received on time because there's always a deadline for grant proposals to be submitted. Confirm the time frame for approval. Ask when will the grants be approved or not. And if your grant is not approved, will feedback be provided for you? Will you get feedback from it to tell you what you did wrong, perhaps? Who is the contact person? Who's the grant specialist, the person that is in charge of processing the reading of your grant proposal? Cultivate opportunities with people that are in the position to approve your grant. Meaning, find out who the grant specialist is, reach out to them, not just when you submit a grant, but before you submit a grant as well. Required meetings. Make sure that you attend whatever required meetings are mandated by the grant processing team. For example, they may want you to come in and talk about your grant proposal like a job interview. So just keep those things in mind. let's talk about the grant writing activities. Let's talk about selling the grant proposal. Now you've written your grant proposal. Now it's time to sell your grant proposal to a group of people who are in a position to provide funding for it. This is a very important meeting. So let's say that you have submitted your grant proposal. The grant funding committee received it on time. They are impressed with what you are planning to do. And they want you to come in and just talk more about what you want to do and why. So most grant funders require that you sell your grant proposal to them during an interview. The following people should attend the interview with you: board member, executive director, program manager, grant writer, and clients, if possible. People who have, if you've already been operating this program and you just need more grant money, bring one of the clients who have benefited from your program to give them an opportunity to share their experiences with the grant funding team. I have the grant writer highlighted in green here because that is the person who should do the most talking during this meeting. This is a serious interview meeting, and I suggest that you rehearse before you attend the meeting. And again, let the grant writer be the primary spokesperson because they are intimately aware of what is in the grant proposal and are in a position to really explain it thoroughly to the grant committee. But everyone should chime in with feedback, but the grant writer should be the primary spokesperson. You want to emphasize these points during the meeting. Client feedback. Once again, if you have a client there, that's great. But if you don't have a client there with you, you can always bring feedback to the meeting with you from clients. Family feedback. If you have family members who recognize the importance of your program and they want to make testimonials, then family feedback. Employee feedback. How do they enjoy working for you? How do they enjoy working with your program? Investors feedback. People who have given money to your program. Have you been responsive to the money? Have you acknowledged the money? Have you shown them a return on their investment? What feedback do investors have? Have that documented. Community feedback. The community at large, how do they feel the services that you're providing for home health services that you're providing? How do the community members feel about that? Are you doing a good job? Bring financial reports with you to show the grant funding team that you keep accurate financial records. Once again, emphasize the return on investment. How much can they expect to see from their investment in your organization? Ask them for questions. Ask them, what questions do you have? Don't ask, do you have any questions? Ask, what questions do you have of our team? And finally, be bold and just ask for the grant money. Ask for the money that you requested in the grant proposal. Please award us with the $75,000 we requested in our grant proposal. We feel that we have provided the information needed for you to make your decision, but if we have not, what questions do you have? And that should be a very successful meeting for you. Now, let's say that you are brand new and you don't have the revenue generation team that I mentioned before, and you're thinking about hiring grant writers for yourself, for your organization. You just don't have time yourself personally to write a grant, so you just want to hire a grant writer. But allow me to give you some pointers on hiring grant writers, because this can be a nightmare experience if you are not careful. How to hire grant writers. 12 steps to hiring grant writers. Step 1, start early. Always recruit grant writers before you need one. Many RFPs or grant applications are released with only a 30-day notice. It can take months to hire a grant writer. So don't wait till the last minute to need a grant writer and then hire someone who is not qualified by mistake. Number 2, do your homework. Learn as much as possible about their experience and what methods they use to write grant proposals. Number 3, request a resume. Seek relevant experience writing the types of grants that support your nonprofit vision. They should have a resume prepared to share with you. Continuing. Number 4, review their educational background. What type of degree have they earned? Now, a degree is not mandatory, but a degree is a nice to have, especially if they have a degree in something like communication. Request success rate. Request a list of grant proposals they have written and indicate which were funded. 85% funding rate is the goal that you're looking for. So just ask for a list, because if you say, well, what's your success rate? They may say, well, my success rate is 100%. And you run with that and say, wow, that's fantastic. But it may be 100% because they've only written one grant. So you want a list of grant proposals they have written and the rate of approval. Examine 2 recent grant proposals. We're asked to see a copy of the 2 most recent funded grant proposals and the award letters. Confirm that they wrote the grant independently. This is a tricky one here. You want to see a copy of the 2 recent funded, the ones that they have received money for, the ones that they successfully wrote, with the award letters. Every time a grant is funded, every time a grant proposal is funded, the grant funder will send an award letter along with the check. So you should be able to see the award letter. And then you want to make sure, if you're hiring them to be the grant writer for your team, ask them, did you write this grant proposal independently? Because sometimes people work in grant writing teams and their only job might be to create the problem statement, but they may not have had anything to do with the narrative or the program description or the budget. Ask them if they wrote the entire grant independently. Number 7, request references. Request references from at least 3 recent clients whose grant proposals were funded. Number 8, meet with the grant writer. Meet with the grant writer in person to assess their enthusiasm and their personality. And if you can't meet them in the physical space together, because they may work remotely from another state, who knows? But with today's technology, you should still be able to meet with them face-to-face, via Skype, via FaceTime, via some other type of social medium. So meet with the grant writer. Ask about their fees. Now this is crucial to understand. Learn how the grant writer earns their compensation. Do they work on an hourly basis? Do they work according to the type of grant it is? Are they paid commission? How are they paid? How are they paid? You want to have a good understanding of how are they paid. And number 10, ask if the grant writer has the time. You may say, well, that's a silly question. Of course they have the time, or they wouldn't be proposing to write the grant. Some people overextend themselves, and they may think they have the time, but they may not actually have the time. So they will say they can complete the grant proposal and not be able to do it. And then you don't have a grant proposal to submit by the deadline. Ask about the RFP process. Does the grant writer locate the RFPs? And if so, what is the additional fee for that service? That's a totally separate service from writing grants. It's totally separate. Locating compatible requests for proposals according to your needs is a time-consuming process. I haven't met a grant writer yet that would do that for free. So if they say that they will look for grant proposals for you, ask them, what is the fee to do that? Request a synopsis. Ask the grant writer to provide a synopsis to explain the grant writing process end to end. In other words, you just want to know, how do you work? How does your grant writing process work? Do you contact people? Do you solicit business? Do people come to you? If a person comes to you with a grant writing need, how do you determine whether or not you're going to take on that client? Do you just write grants for smaller grants, or do you tackle federal grants? What's your process? Those are the 12 steps to selecting grant writers. Some words of advice here. Create a grant writing team. Submit mini grant proposals weekly. Track the grant proposals on a spreadsheet. Use RFP keywords in the grant proposal. Keep the proposal simple and easy to read. Be compelling, but don't beg for money. Revise grant proposals at least 3 times before you submit them. Cultivate relationships with the funders. Send thank you letters for approved proposals. Send follow-up letters for rejected proposals. Do not start a program without money. Ignore the little word. It's a subtle insult. You will hear people saying things like, I heard about your little program, or I heard about the efforts that you're making that are not going to make a difference. Have you ever thought about how many other programs are doing this? All these little subtle insults, ignore those. Be proud. Be proud of yourself. You are making a difference. You care about other people, and that's something that is very, very special about you. Take care of yourself. Stay healthy. You cannot help anyone if you're not healthy yourself. Don't allow yourself to be stressed out over submitting a grant proposal. Just do the best that you can. Thank you so much for ordering the Basic Grant Writing DVD. I hope the information I shared exceeded your expectations. I'm Susan Woods, a nonprofit consultant. If you have any questions, please call me at 704-968-2769 or visit my website at www.susanwoodsnonprofitconsultingservices.com. Thank you, and continue with the great work you're doing. Have a good day.